The desert sun was merciless at 0600 hours, already casting long shadows across the rocky terrain that Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb had learned to call home over the past 18 months. He adjusted his rifle strap and checked his watch. Their patrol was scheduled to return to base by 0800, but something felt wrong. "Sarge, you seeing this?" Corporal Johnson pointed toward a ridge about 300 meters ahead. Movement on the north face. Marcus raised his binoculars and scanned the area. Nothing. But Johnson had the best eyes in the unit, and Marcus had learned to trust his instincts. "Rodriguez, take point. Davis, watch our 6. We're going to check it out," Marcus ordered quietly. The patrol consisted of 5 men: Marcus, Johnson, Rodriguez, Davis, and Private First Class Thompson, barely 19 and on his first deployment. They'd been working together for 8 months, long enough to function like a well-oiled machine, but not long enough for Marcus to stop worrying about keeping them all alive. "Sarge, shouldn't we radio this in?" asked Davis, the squad's communications specialist. "Not yet. Could be nothing. No point in calling false alarms." Marcus made this decision based on their briefing from Captain Morrison 12 hours earlier. "Intelligence indicates possible civilian movement in Sector 7. Investigate and report, but maintain radio silence unless contact is imminent. We don't want to spook any friendlies." They moved forward in formation, each step calculated and quiet. The terrain was challenging. Loose rocks that could give away their position, sparse vegetation that offered little cover, and a constant threat of snipers from the high ground. 20 minutes into their advance, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. Fresh tire tracks in the sand, too recent to be from their morning patrol route. "Johnson, what's your read on those tracks?" "Heavy vehicles, Sarge. Multiple. And they're heading directly toward our patrol route." Marcus felt his stomach drop. They'd walked into a trap. "All units, we need to..." The first shot came from a ridge, followed immediately by a barrage of automatic weapons fire. The ambush was perfectly coordinated, with shooters positioned on 3 sides of their position. "Contact! Take cover!" Marcus shouted, diving behind a large boulder as bullets whistled past his head. Thompson went down immediately, hit in the shoulder. Rodriguez dragged him to cover, while Davis tried to establish radio contact with base. "Base, this is Patrol 7. We're taking heavy fire. Need immediate support." "Static." Then more static. "Communications are jammed, Sarge." Davis yelled over the gunfire. Marcus assessed their situation rapidly. They were outnumbered at least 3-1, caught in a kill zone with minimal cover, and cut off from reinforcements. The textbook response would be to fall back and wait for support, but Thompson was bleeding heavily and wouldn't survive a prolonged firefight. "Rodriguez, how bad is Thompson?" "Bad, Sarge. He's losing a lot of blood." Marcus made a decision that would haunt him for months to come. Instead of falling back as protocol dictated, he decided to break out of the kill zone. "Listen up. We're going to punch through their line on the west side. Rodriguez, you carry Thompson. Davis, lay down suppressing fire on my mark. Johnson, you're with me. We're going to flank them." "Sarge, that's not what..." Davis started to object. "I know what the manual says, but the manual doesn't account for Thompson bleeding out. We do this my way, or we all die here." What followed was the most intense 15 minutes of Marcus's 12-year military career. Under heavy fire, they managed to break through the enemy line. Johnson took a bullet in the leg but kept moving. Marcus eliminated 3 enemy combatants and identified their positions for an airstrike that would come 6 hours too late. By the time they reached the emergency extraction point, Marcus was carrying both Thompson and Johnson, while Rodriguez and Davis provided rear security. They traveled 4 kilometers through hostile territory, dodging patrols and avoiding roadside bombs. The helicopter that picked them up was a miracle. Thompson survived, though he lost his left arm. Johnson recovered fully, but was medically discharged. Rodriguez, Davis, and Marcus were treated for minor injuries and exhaustion. Marcus expected a hero's welcome. Instead, he found himself in Captain Morrison's office 48 hours later, facing a formal inquiry. "Staff Sergeant Webb, your actions during the ambush have raised serious questions about your judgment and adherence to established protocols. Sir, I don't understand. We completed the mission and brought everyone home alive. You disobeyed direct orders. You were specifically instructed to maintain defensive positions and wait for support in case of contact. Marcus stared at Morrison in disbelief. Sir, Thompson would have died if we'd waited for support. And our communications were jammed. There was no way to call for help. That's not the point, Sergeant. You deviated from established protocol and put your entire unit at risk. At risk? We were already at risk. The ambush was set up specifically to catch us in that position. Morrison's expression hardened. Are you questioning the intelligence briefing I provided? No, sir. I'm questioning why that intelligence was so completely wrong. The meeting ended with Marcus being informed that he would face a formal court-martial for disobeying orders and reckless endangerment of his unit. That night, Marcus sat in his quarters, staring at the citations he'd received for previous missions. 12 years of spotless service, commendations for valor, and the respect of every soldier he'd ever served with. Now he faced the possibility of a dishonorable discharge and prison time. His wife, Sarah, called from home. Marcus, honey, I saw the news about the ambush. Are you okay? Marcus wanted to tell her everything about the charges, about the court-martial, about how the system he'd served faithfully was now turning against him. But he couldn't find the words. I'm fine, Sada. Just tired. When are you coming home? I don't know. There are some complications. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the ambush, analyzing every decision he'd made. He'd save his men's lives, but according to the military justice system, he committed a crime by doing so. 3 days later, he received a visit from Lieutenant Colonel Andrews, the investigating officer assigned to his case. Sergeant Webb, I need to ask you some questions about the intelligence briefing you received before the patrol. Of course, sir. According to Captain Morrison, you were told to investigate possible civilian movement and report back. Is that accurate? Yes, sir. But there was more to it than that. More. Marcus hesitated. Something in Andrews' tone suggested he should be careful with his answer. Sir, Captain Morrison specifically told us to maintain radio silence unless contact was imminent. He said we didn't want to spook any friendlies. Andrews made notes. And you interpreted contact imminent to mean what exactly? I interpreted it to mean that if we were about to be fired upon, we should radio for help. But by the time we realized we were in an ambush, it was too late. Communications were jammed. So you decided to break out of the kill zone instead of waiting for support. Yes, sir. Thompson was bleeding out, and we had no way to call for help. Andrews closed his notebook. Sergeant Webb, I'm going to be honest with you. This case doesn't add up. The intelligence report that led to your patrol has some inconsistencies. What kind of inconsistencies? I can't discuss details, but I want you to know that I'm going to recommend a full investigation into the circumstances surrounding your mission. Marcus felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in days. Sir, do you think there's more to this? I think a good soldier like you doesn't suddenly start disobeying orders without a reason. And I think someone needs to explain why that ambush was so perfectly positioned to catch your patrol. After Andrews left, Marcus began to think about the details of their mission. The intelligence had been wrong, but not just wrong. It had been precisely wrong in a way that led them directly into a trap. Someone had set them up. But who? And why? The court-martial was scheduled for 2 weeks later, but Lieutenant Colonel Andrews had been busy during that time. He requested a meeting with Marcus 3 days before the trial. Sergeant Webb, I need to show you something. Andrews spread several documents across the table in the secure conference room. This is the original intelligence report that led to your patrol mission. Notice the date and timestamp. Marcus studied the document. It was dated 3 days before their patrol, and it specifically mentioned civilian movement in Sector 7. Now look at this, Andrews continued, placing another document on the table. This is a communication intercept from enemy forces dated the same day. Marcus read the intercept, his blood running cold. It was a detailed description of patrol routes, timing, and personnel assignments. Someone had provided the enemy with precise information about their mission. Someone leaked our operational details? More than that, Someone provided the enemy with enough information to set up a perfect ambush. Andrews pulled out a third document. This is where it gets interesting. The intelligence report that sent you on that patrol was amended after you left base. The original version warned of possible enemy activity in Sector 7, not civilian movement. Marcus felt his heart pounding. Someone changed the intelligence after we left. Someone wanted your patrol to walk into that ambush unprepared. And when you survived and brought your men home, they needed to discredit you before you could figure out what happened. Who would do this? Andrews looked uncomfortable. That's what we need to find out. But I can tell you this. The person who modified that intelligence report has access to the highest levels of operational planning. Marcus thought about Captain Morrison's behavior during their confrontation. The captain had seemed less concerned about the disobedience charge than about controlling the narrative of what happened. Sir, I think Captain Morrison is involved. I was hoping you wouldn't say that. You suspected him too? Andrews nodded grimly. Morrison has been under financial pressure. Gambling debts, expensive lifestyle, child support payments. He's been living beyond his means for 2 years. You think he's selling information? I think he's been compromised. And I think your patrol was supposed to be eliminated to protect his operation. Marcus felt sick. My men almost died because of his greed. But they didn't die, Marcus. They survived because you made the right call. And now we're going to prove it. The next day, Andrews arranged for Marcus to meet with an investigator from the Criminal Investigation Division. Sergeant Webb, we've been building a case against Captain Morrison for 6 months. Your ambush was the break we needed. Ow! The enemy communications we intercepted after your patrol contained details that only Morrison could have provided. Radio frequencies, backup extraction points, even the names of your team members. Marcus felt anger building inside him. He gave them our names. He gave them everything. But here's the thing. He didn't expect you to survive. When you broke out of that kill zone, you disrupted their entire operation. And the court-martial is Morrison's attempt to discredit you before you could piece together what happened. He's been pushing hard for a quick conviction to close the case. 3 days later, instead of facing a court-martial, Marcus found himself testifying as a key witness in Captain Morrison's treason trial. Sergeant Webb, in your opinion, was the intelligence briefing you received accurate? No, sir. It was completely wrong. We were told to expect civilian movement, but we walked into a coordinated enemy ambush. And your decision to break out of the kill zone, it was the only way to save my men's lives. If we'd followed standard protocol and waited for support, Thompson would have died, and probably all of us. Do you believe your patrol was deliberately sent into that ambush? Marcus looked directly at Morrison, who was sitting at the defendant's table with his head down. Yes, sir. I believe we were set up. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Morrison had been receiving payments from enemy agents for 18 months. He provided information that led to the deaths of 17 soldiers and the capture of 4 others. Marcus's patrol was meant to be his biggest payday. Intelligence about a high-value target patrol that could be eliminated in a spectacular ambush. Morrison's only mistake was underestimating Marcus's leadership and his team's determination to survive. The verdict was swift, guilty on all charges. Morrison was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the trial, Marcus was summoned to meet with the base commander, General Patterson. Sergeant Webb, on behalf of the entire command, I want to apologize for what you've been put through. Your actions during the ambush were exemplary, and you saved the lives of your men. Thank you, sir. I'm also pleased to inform you that you're being promoted to Sergeant First Class, and you'll be receiving the Silver Star for your heroism under fire. Marcus appreciated the recognition, but he was more relieved that the truth had finally come out. Sir, what about the other soldiers who were killed because of Morrison's treason? Their families will be notified of the true circumstances of their deaths. It won't bring them back, but they deserve to know that their loved ones died as heroes, not because of intelligence failures. 6 months later, Marcus was back home with Sarah and their 2 children. The nightmares from the ambush had faded, replaced by a deep sense of purpose. He'd been assigned to a new unit, training young soldiers in combat leadership and tactical decision-making. Every day, he taught them the same lesson he'd learned in the desert. sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. But he also taught them something else. The system isn't always right, and good soldiers have to be prepared to fight for the truth, even when it's uncomfortable or dangerous. One afternoon, while reviewing after-action reports from training exercises, Marcus received a call from Lieutenant Colonel Andrews. "Marcus, I wanted to let you know that the investigation into Morrison's network led to 3 more arrests. We've identified and eliminated a significant security breach that had been operating for almost 2 years." "I'm glad to hear it, sir. There's something else. Rodriguez has been accepted into officer candidate school. He says you inspired him to pursue a career in leadership." Marcus smiled. Rodriguez had been a good soldier, but the ambush had changed him. He'd seen what real leadership looked like under pressure, and he wanted to be that kind of leader for other soldiers. "That's great news, sir. And Thompson, the kid with the arm injury?" "He's doing well. He's been assigned to training command, teaching battlefield medicine. He says that what you did in the desert, refusing to leave him behind, saved his life and gave him a new purpose." After the call, Marcus sat in his office thinking about the cost of doing the right thing. He'd almost lost his career, his family had endured months of uncertainty, and he'd been branded a criminal for saving his men's lives. But he'd also learned that integrity isn't about following orders blindly. It's about making the right choice when no one else will. Even when the system is against you. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. A young sergeant entered, looking nervous. "Sergeant First Class Webb? I'm Sergeant Martinez. I was told you might be able to help me with something." "What's the problem, Sergeant?" "I think my unit commander is asking me to do something that isn't right. I don't know who to talk to about it." Marcus gestured for Martinez to sit down. "Tell me what's going on." As Martinez began to tell his story, Marcus realized that the fight for integrity in the military would never end. There would always be soldiers who faced impossible choices, who had to decide between following orders and doing what was right. But now he was in a position to help them make those choices. He could be the voice of experience, the mentor who understood that sometimes the most important battles are fought not against external enemies, but against the corruption and compromise that can destroy an institution from within. "Sergeant Martinez, let me tell you about a patrol I went on 18 months ago." Marcus began to share his story, knowing that each soldier who heard it would be better prepared to face their own moral challenges. The ambush at the border had taught him that survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about maintaining your integrity in a world that often rewarded corruption and punished honesty. And sometimes, the most important victory is simply refusing to compromise your principles, no matter what the cost. Years later, when Marcus looked back on his career, he wouldn't remember the commendations or the promotions. He'd remember the moment when he chose to break out of that kill zone to save his men, and the long fight to prove that sometimes disobeying orders is the most honorable thing a soldier can do. The desert had taught him that true leadership isn't about following the manual. It's about making the right choice when everything is on the line, even when no one else understands why you're doing it. In that lesson, he passed on to every soldier he trained, hoping that when their moment came, they'd have the courage to choose integrity over convenience, truth over comfort, and their men over their careers. Because in the end, that's what honor really means.